For what, almost half a century, Iran and Israel were locked in this intense shadow war. A constant dance of proxies, cyber attacks, covert ops, the whole shebang. But then, in 2025, everything changed. So in this explainer, we're going to unravel the absolutely incredible story of how these two nations went from being shockingly close partners to mortal enemies, right on the brink of open war.
It's the ultimate breakdown of deterrence. That one sentence, it just nails the whole shift. For 45 years, this conflict was all indirect, a strategic game of chess. But in June 2025, that entire system just failed. It completely broke down, leading to direct state-on-state conflict. A new and, honestly, a much more dangerous chapter had just begun.
I mean, just look at this transformation. It's staggering. From a quiet, pragmatic alliance to just open, raw hostility. And it really brings us to the biggest question we're trying to answer here. How on earth did two countries that were once so deeply connected end up ready to go to war? To figure that out, we've got to rewind the clock.
Yeah, before the revolution, way before all the little Satan rhetoric, there was this alliance, and it was an alliance built on pure pragmatism. It was a relationship that made sense because they shared enemies and had mutual interests in a really, really volatile part of the world. This partnership wasn't an overnight thing. It was built up piece by piece over decades. It really kicked off back in 1950, when Iran basically recognized Israel. And let me tell you, that was a huge deal for a Muslim-majority nation at the time. From there, it just kept growing, becoming official policy in the late 50s, and then really taking off with massive joint projects in the 60s and 70s. And the engine driving all of it was a shared and very practical strategic vision. Okay, so the whole idea, the core of their strategy, was this thing called the Periphery Alliance. For Israel, it was simple. They were surrounded by hostile Arab countries, so the logic was, let's make friends with the neighbors of our neighbors. And Iran, a major non-Arab power that was also nervous about guys like Egypt's Gamal Abdel Nasser and Soviet influence, well, it was a perfect match. Look, this was never about ideology or friendship. It was pure, hard-nosed geopolitics. It was about survival. And wow, when you look at just how deep this cooperation went, it's pretty mind-blowing. Iran was providing the oil that was literally Israel's economic lifeline. In return, Israel gave the military tech and, this is a big one, helped train Savak, the Shah's, his notorious and pretty feared secret police. You even had Israeli companies building hotels in Tehran. It was a really comprehensive, if very quiet, partnership. And then, boom. One single event just changed everything. It wasn't a slow fizzling out of a relationship. It was a sudden, violent earthquake that completely redrew the map of the Middle East.
The Islamic Revolution wasn't just a regime change. It completely rewrote the DNA of the Iranian state. The pro-Western pragmatic monarchy was just gone, replaced by a revolutionary theocracy that saw the world in a totally different way.
And this, right here, became the new guiding principle. Ayatollah Khomeini's ideology just bulldozed decades of strategic cooperation. All of a sudden, being hostile to Israel, the little Satan, and its main backer, the United States, wasn't just foreign policy. It was a core part of the Islamic Republic's entire identity.
And the consequences? They were immediate and honestly pretty dramatic. Diplomatic ties were cut just like that. And in this incredibly powerful symbolic move, the Israeli embassy in Tehran was literally handed over to the Palestine Liberation Organization. This sent shockwaves everywhere. A CIA memo from the time even said that the Shah's fall rattled everyone's confidence in the US and just reinforced Israel's belief that at the end of the day, they could only count on themselves for their security.
So after that clean break in '79, you'd think that would be it, right? But the rivalry didn't just go away. It morphed. It became something new, something way more complex. A long, grinding war fought through other people, in the shadows, all based on being able to say, hey, it wasn't me. Okay, get ready for this, because this is where things get really wild. The irony here is just off the charts. Even while Khomeini was railing against the little Satan, Israel was secretly selling his regime weapons. Why? Well, because they both had a common enemy, Saddam Hussein's Iraq. The goal was to keep both sides stuck in a long, bloody war so they'd both be weaker. It's a stunning example of how cold, hard strategy can completely trump public rhetoric. After the war with Iraq was over, Iran really perfected its main weapon in this new kind of conflict, the axis of resistance. This whole network of proxies, with Hezbollah as the crown jewel, let Iran project its power and attack its enemies without ever leaving its own fingerprints on the scene. It meant any counterattack would hit the proxy, not Iran itself.
And we are not talking about small change here. The money Iran poured into this strategy is just staggering. Back in 2020, the U.S. State Department figured Iran was spending up to $1 billion a year on this network. That river of cash turned groups like Hezbollah into these incredibly powerful, almost state-like forces, basically giving Iran a strategic outpost right on Israel's northern border.
Okay, so let's recap. You've got this revolutionary ideology, you've got this powerful proxy network, but there was one more piece to the puzzle, one final, critical element that built up enough pressure to finally push this 45-year shadow war out into the open.
And that final piece was Iran's nuclear program. By mid-2025, Iran was enriching uranium to 60% purity, which is terrifyingly close to the 90% you need for a bomb. Now here's the really crucial part. The technical leap from 60% to 90% is way, way faster and easier than it was to get to 60 in the first place. This meant Iran's entire proxy network was now about to be operating under a potential nuclear umbrella. And that just raised the stakes to an existential level for Israel.
So that's the big question, right? After all this time, why did things finally boil over in mid-2025? Well, analysts point to a kind of perfect storm of three big pressures hitting all at once. First, the regime was under huge strain at home. Sanctions, protests, and an external conflict is a classic way to distract from that. Second, a war would instantly derail the historic peace talks between Israel and Saudi Arabia. And finally, there was a political calculation in Tehran that they needed to make a move before a potentially more isolationist U.S. administration came to power.
And when Iran finally made its move, it was huge. We're talking nearly 900 missiles and 1,000 drones. But here's the thing, it was a total bust. A huge strategic failure for Iran. The vast majority were shot down by Israeli and American forces. The attack basically exposed Iran's conventional military as a kind of toothless tiger, and it really damaged the regime's reputation for military strength.
And that brings us to where we are now. The old rules are gone. That 45-year shadow war is over. And what's replaced it is a direct, unpredictable, and frankly, much scarier confrontation. Which leaves us with the critical question for the entire region. Now that this fight is out in the open, can you ever really put that genie back in the bottle?